G'day ladies and gents, Cubic Media here on the Wavetech server for my very first project, Copper Farm with an explosive chain reaction. Later on we'll have a look at the farm that I built for Wavetech and get into a build time lapse. But first of all, let's start with the copper farms. We will of course be using the reinforcement spawning mechanic discovered by Nembon. And here is an example of one of the standard designs that he established. I'll leave it to him and his amazing video to explain exactly how the mechanic works. After all, I simply cannot compete with the kind of modifications and visuals he implements directly into the game in order to explain the mechanic. However, I will mention that the use of snow golems seem to inhibit the potential scope for how the mechanic could actually be used. The brief is that zombies and drowns will tend to summon reinforcements if they flash red with the hurt animation while tracking a target that they want to attack. However, the damage which causes the flashing hurt animation does not need to come from the same entity that the zombie is targeting. In fact, all you really need is a target such as a villager and something to hurt the zombie so that it flashes red with its hurt animation. And there we go, just summon a reinforcement like that. And while snow golems are great for a simple farm to get started on your copper supply, the fact that each snow golem hurts only a single zombie at a time means that you need as many golems as zombies if you want to scale up the rates. And this becomes very complicated and prohibitive very quickly. Then you also run into limitations due to the golem's accuracy and the fact that the projectiles cannot penetrate very far. And the largest of the golem based copper farms, for all their scale and complexity, don't really produce an appreciable amount of copper, especially given the amount of lag that they cause. Alright, let's bring it back to the start. In theory, snow golems seem like the optimal solution, as they provide an infinite source of the hurt animation without actually depleting our zombie's health. However, this infinite source of damage comes at the trade-off of only damaging one zombie at a time. However, what if there was another option which would damage all of our zombies with the trade-off of depleting a small amount of their health? Yes, of course I mean TNT. Normally when directly exposed to an explosion from TNT, most mobs will just die instantly. However, with adequate shielding, even this zombie right next to the center of the blast barely takes any damage whatsoever. And it's interesting because this minimum amount of damage is invariant to the amount of shielding you put between the TNT and the entity taking damage. This minimum damage that TNT does is exactly equal to 0.94 hit points. And you can see that almost exactly 0.94 health was taken off of this zombie. Here I have summoned 9 zombies with exactly 0.94 points of health. And with this we'll be able to see that the maximum range that the TNT can damage is exactly equal to 8 blocks. This minimum amount of damage means that a zombie can survive 22 explosions before its health is fully depleted. But of course, in order to farm copper, we want the zombie to survive and turn into a drowned. But here's the awesome thing, right? We can take a zombie whose health is completely depleted, convert it into a drowned, and then suddenly its health is fully replenished and we can use it again to summon more zombies. This means if we time our TNT perfectly with the conversion of our zombies, we can get up to 42 hits in before it's completely depleted. The next step was to start with Nembon's spawning platforms and zombie to drown converter. I then went through several iterations perfecting the farm until I was happy with the results. And here is my final result for a general use case copper farm. A lot of considerations had to go into this. Because it takes so long for the zombie to get through the system, I wanted to make sure that the player was as close to the conversion chamber as possible. This is to ensure that the zombies do not despawn. This sphere right here visualizes the can despawn sphere, where any mob outside of this sphere has the potential to despawn at random. So by ensuring that our zombies remain inside of this sphere, we can ensure that they do not despawn while they're doing the conversion. However, this needed to be balanced with 2 other factors, primarily how high up you build the farm and the spawner activation range. The first problem is very specific, in that drowned are not pushed by water at night if they are below Y60. However, above Y60, and being pushed by water is invariant to the conditions of the time of the day. This means we need to make absolutely sure that all the points in which we need to push them around with water are above Y60. This is why I've built the farm with these tall water elevators coming from the spawner. Because quite likely you're only going to find these spawners deep underground, and having this long neck on the farm gives you the best chance of having the farm above Y60 while also being able to utilize a spawner. This means that you have to find a zombie spawner where when you stand on it, the Y value that you get has to be no lower than 34. But fortunately this shouldn't be completely unreasonable, and it's quite likely you'll be able to find a zombie spawner that is at least Y34. And using the farm is pretty straightforward. We have a simple minecart looting system similar to one that Doc M77 implemented in his Octochunk. If I go ahead and hit this minecart, you can see that it damages all the drowned in that space. And every time I hit the minecart, it will get redispensed automatically. The minecart looting system comes in very handy for two reasons. First being that zombies and drowned can spawn with gear enchanted with thorns, which can eventually kill the player over time. However, if I instead attack the zombie through a minecart using Sweeping Edge, I do not take any damage from the thorns. The second reason the minecart looting is quite handy is that by flipping this lever, I connect up this circuit below, and now, if I strike the minecart, the farm will start up this cooldown clock and initiate the TNT duplication system, which is what damages our zombies and does the reinforcement spawning. So of course we're duplicating TNT in order to provide the damage for the zombies and the drowned. I'm not quite sure, given the measly rates of copper from drowned, that it'll be worthwhile actually dispensing TNT that you crafted. And I'm really hoping that Mojang eventually implements better ways of getting copper. But for now, this solution works really well and it's actually really fun to use. The really cool thing about this farm is that it operates in many ways like a nuclear reactor, where the reaction ramps up over time as the number of zombies and drowned increase, which spawn more reinforcement, until you get this crazy explosive chain reaction, which causes the amount of drowned to explode. And after an hour, the farm finally ramps up to its full speed of about 1,000 copper ingots per hour. And it's especially satisfying when you have these tinted glass housings in which you can see the reinforcement spawning happening in real time. It's crazy because there are so many ways in which you can adapt, improve, and fine-tune this farm for your specific needs. This layout is simply meant to be a general use case in which anybody can load the schematic for and use in their own worlds. But let's say that you don't appreciate all the lag that the farm causes. Well, all you need to do is go to this clock right here, which controls the explosion interval, and simply add items in order to increase the interval. This will effectively slow down the rate of the reaction. If you want to try and force the farm to accelerate the spawning speeds, you can remove this scaffolding, which acts as a sort of inhibitor. This is because the scaffolding effectively removes the collisions between zombies as they approach the chamber. This means that zombies are effectively able to pile up at this point right here, just inside of the TNT's range. And as excess zombies pile up, they take more damage from the TNT, and therefore the farm will automatically throttle itself by killing off excess amounts of zombies. However, I don't recommend removing the scaffolding because then all of this water will flow into this space and destroy all of the cobwebs. There's also the issue that if you remove the scaffolding, zombies will instead pile up all the way into the spawning platforms and result in a runaway effect of lag. And lag is a serious issue with this farm, mainly because the reaction goes on indefinitely to the point that it starts choking the server. So it's really fascinating how tiny adjustments such as this scaffolding can have huge impacts on the performance of the farm. Now, this is only the general model of the farm, which can be built anywhere in any world. But what happens if we ramp this reactor up to the extreme? Let me introduce Wavetech's Explosive Chain Reaction Copper Reactor. And here I am in the same location on the Wavetech Survival server. A while back, JKM and I picked this specific location and forced a sextuple zombie spawner to generate above Y60. This offers the perfect template for the ultimate copper farm. I then went ahead and built up a customized layout in the same location on the creative copy. In a moment we'll cut to a time lapse of building this in survival. However, first we need to solve a small problem. We We want to be able to see the reaction happening inside of the farm, which means we need all of this tinted glass. Now of course, if you were looking at the general purpose copper farm and thinking, how am I going to get all that tinted glass? Be aware that you absolutely do not have to use tinted glass in the build of this farm. You can of course use any other kind of block which is solid, such as stone, cobblestone, oak planks, you name it. However, we're not cutting any corners with our farm, and we're going to need a lot of tinted glass. My goodness, is tinted glass expensive. You need 4 amethyst shards to make 2 tinted glass, which means you need twice the amount of shards than glass. Which means we're going to need over 14,000 amethyst shards just to get enough tinted glass to make our copper farm. Fortunately on the Wavetech server, we found a location which has a dense cluster of amethyst geodes. The only problem is that every single cluster generates with a unique configuration of the budding amethyst, which means every single geode needs its own unique wiring in order to farm it. I decided to settle with just 2 of them for now, and we've gone ahead and built them up in survival and left them running for a few days. Alright, how much amethyst do we have now? Oh. In an attempt to make an amethyst farm for getting enough tinted glass for our copper farm project, we've gone ahead and accidentally made an axolotl farm. Like, what on earth? This farm literally farms glow squid and axolotls faster than it farms the damn crystals we're supposed to be farming. God, this is infuriating. Alright, just a few days later, and check out all the shards that we have. We finally have enough to get started on the copper farm. So let's finally go ahead and get into a build time lapse. Hey, now we're cooking with TNT. A huge thanks to my fellow Wavetech members, Eagler and JKM, who helped out with building the farm. And it was definitely worth it using all the tinted glass, as it's so cool being able to see the reaction happen inside, while it also being perfectly dark for spawning. Alright, let's go ahead and enable a gamma override to make sure we can actually see what's going on. Inside this massive chamber we have our sextuple spawners, providing all the zombies to start our reaction. As the reaction goes on, the number of zombies will multiply exponentially. In fact, this customized layout is so powerful that it will actually grind the server to a halt. In order to solve this issue, I've gone ahead and implemented 2no2name's llama-based lag detector. Check out his video on it for a full explanation of how the mechanic works. Basically, these two llamas, along with all of this circuitry, are capable of detecting when the server drops below 20 TPS. If you're confused as to what this means, TPS is essentially how fast the game is running. This is usually a constant value of 20 game ticks per second. However, if there are a lot of things happening in the game, then it can take longer and longer for the game to process each subsequent game tick. Eventually, all of this becomes too much for the game to handle, and it starts to lag behind, and the TPS begins to drop. However, with our llama-based lag detector, we can detect when this lag begins to happen, and while the game is dropping below 20 TPS, we will actually continuously dispense items into this clock, forcing the interval between TNT blasts to increase, and thus slowing down the rate at which zombies are spawned. This means as the server begins to lag, the farm will actually detect this and respond accordingly, automatically throttling itself in order to bring the performance back to normal. This means that this copper farm will always run at the absolute limit in which the server can handle. Isn't that awesome? We can actually build farms that can detect when they're causing lag, which then throttle themselves automatically. This has to be my favorite aspect of the copper reactor. The fact that it's able to detect when it's about to go into a meltdown, and then enact countermeasures in order to prevent lagging in the server. And there we go, TPS is rising back up to normal. Albeit rather slowly. Come on, cut it some slack. It's literally using llamas as redstone components. And would you look at that, we've already got our first shulker box of copper. At full capacity, running pretty much at the server's performance limit, this farm can produce up to 3,500 copper ingots per hour. That is about 2 of these shulker boxes every hour. Only 3,500 copper ingots per hour, and we're already running at the server's performance limit. So this must represent the absolute limit for farming copper in the current meta, especially using the zombie reinforcement spawning mechanic. I hope this demonstrates that we definitely need better ways of farming copper. In theory, if we wanted to go ahead and cover the entire floor of the perimeter such as this one in copper blocks, we would have to run the copper farm for about 14 days at the server's performance limit. That is absolutely insane. There definitely needs to be a more lag efficient and more scalable method of producing more copper. And so you might go ahead and think, why not just find a nice river biome and build a spawning based drowned farm? And you are correct in thinking this way, as Minecraft's regular spawning based algorithm is much more lag efficient than the reinforcement spawning. Now consider that this entire world is a ginormous river biome, which is the optimal biome for drowned to spawn naturally. In this world, we have the optimal spawning layout for drowned as well. 2 layers of water and a spawnable block at the bottom. We're even cheating and using command blocks to teleport the drowned directly to the player where they kill them with a looting free sword. And despite all of this effort, we are hardly getting any copper whatsoever. That is absolutely insane. We've scaled up the natural spawning of drowned to a point which is completely unrealistic, and yet we only got a 140% increase in the amount of copper compared to the reinforcement spawning. But man, this reactor really is holding steady at the point of meltdown. And already another 2 shulker boxes of copper. Alright, back to the simple copper farm. After building in survival, there are a few important details that I want to note. First of all, making the bubble columns. In order to make the water, you want to go ahead and cap off the bubble columns like that. Place down some ice. And then go ahead and break the ice to create the flowing water. And for these, you want to break the ice again, remove these 2 slabs, and place down some slabs like so. And go ahead and get inside the bubble column. Make sure it's capped off. When you get to the bottom, close off these fence gates so that no zombies get in and attack you. Place down kelp. Bone meal it all the way to the top, like this. Then break it again. And now you have fully formed bubble columns. Now you can go ahead and remove those slabs. And you have the bubble columns for transporting zombies from the spawning chamber. In order to get the villagers into position, be sure to use a minecart to place them directly on top of the composter. And make sure the cart builds up some considerable speed. All you need to do is break the minecart, place down the trapdoor, and now the villager is in position. And of course, just repeat this step for each villager. Also, this dropper clock here requires exactly 4 items for optimal spawning. However, you can increase this amount of items if you want to slow down the farm. And finally, when placing TNT into the TNT dupers, make sure to flip this lever to activate the safety so you can safely place down the TNT, then flip the lever off again, and now TNT duper should work perfectly. So there we have it! A copper farm with an explosive chain reaction, and an introduction to the amazing community of the Wavetech server. If you want to try out the farm for yourself, I'll be leaving a world download and a link to the Mobfarm Archive down in the description. Also, if you're wanting to catch the full version of the track I made for the intro and the time-lapse, you can find it on my second channel where I post my music. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.